Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out on this miserable evening. I would have crawled on my hands and knees to be here tonight to launch this report because it is very special to me. And I think of all the decent dads that I've met over the years, to be speaking here tonight and to have the privilege of launching this report is something I couldn't have dreamt of. So I'm really proud to have been asked to this auspicious occasion. Firstly, I want to thank the Commission for their hard work and their utter professionalism in compiling and working on this report. And I think in an era when government has become increasingly complex, it remains vital to government that it has such expert research and indeed advice. The Law Reform Commission provides this to government departments on a regular basis and on many critical issues. And I also want to thank all those who've engaged with the Commission in this process and who have made submissions to it following the publication of its consultation document in September of 2009. And here we are just before Christmas with this wonderful, wonderful copy of this report. I am personally very honoured to be launching this report this evening, and for several years I've been involved with what I call the decent dads right throughout Ireland and indeed in my own constituency, and I've become increasingly familiar with their very personal stories. And in cases of many parents who do not have access to their children and have told me in heartbreaking detail about the trauma of perhaps losing a child being abducted, lack of access, custody or guardianship. New words now, we have new words, and I think it's much better that we do have those more familiar words to describe those three key issues for decent dads. And I think as awareness of these issues has grown and also the media exposure has highlighted the issue. And I want to thank all the men's groups and the fathers groups, and I've met many of you, for your relentless, consistent and hard-working media exercise to bring the issue to the forefront. Because without good campaigning groups, maybe we wouldn't be here as quickly as we are. So I want to thank you. I've been a campaigner all my life, so it's good to meet the men's groups who are campaigning hard for a equality issue. And I want to say that the deprivation that can happen to fathers who lose their children through a family law court decision or through personal trauma has touched me greatly over the years. Now, some of these parents and the groups which have worked so hard to bring these issues to the fore are here today, and I welcome you indeed, and for whom there is great hope that from the publication of this report that we will get action. And I acknowledge the work they have done to support the countless families, whether it's in Galway, whether it's the Miles Group in Limerick, whether it's groups in Dublin or in my own constituency of Carlow Kilkenny. You've been a great advocate for this incredibly human cause that you're involved in. Over the past couple of years, I've been contacted too by many, many sets of grandparents who've been devastated by the loss of their grandchildren because their sons haven't had regular or frequent access to their grandchildren. And I think the report comes at a time of great social change in Ireland and great flux and great change in our family patterns. I mean, what is a family now? It has a much broader remit than what it has several years ago. An increasing number of people are living together in non-marital relationships. We have marriages, we have divorce, we have remarriages, we have civil partnerships, and we are becoming a more equal society, and that's good. And change couldn't come quick enough. I'm delighted too, as a Green Party member of the government, that we're able to advance the Civil Partnership Bill and bring forward a more equal Ireland for those in same-sex relationships and working towards further equality in that area too. There's been greater focus on the protection and status of children in recent years, and there's been a lot of discussion and documentations on the failings of the state and successive governments in the protection of our children. In policy discourse, there has been significant work to enhance the rights of the child, and that is only right and appropriate. Very recently, the government legislated on the issue of adoption, and I see this report and the work which will follow as part of the ongoing need to reform the law concerning relationships between the child, the parent and our state. I welcome the recommendation on the reform of terminology, I said in the start, much more family-friendly terms. These have been made to give greater, I think, accuracy, clarity and consistency Guardianship now to be named parental responsibility. I'll have to learn to use that word now. Custody to be termed day-to-day care. Access to be termed contact. And these are better use of phrases. So well done, whoever thought up those much more family-friendly terms. And one of the many challenges facing parents today concerning the law is the knowledge about the rights and responsibilities that come with parenthood. And we mustn't forget that. Becoming a parent does have rights and responsibility. I remember when I became a parent myself and hadn't a clue, and I had a very good mother to help me on my way. I remember reading a book, maybe some of you are, indeed yourself, Justice Catherine McGuinness, have read the book called On Being a Good Enough Parent by Bruno Bettelheim. And we can only be a good enough parent because we're only doing it for the first time when we have our children. And it's amazing how our children survive being a good enough parent. But if we are good enough, that is the beauty of raising our children. I think the recommendations in the report are so far-reaching and indeed ambitious, and I commend the Commission for taking this approach. In its report, it states that it was guided by the principles of the primacy of the rights and best interests of the child and equality. And I quote, "All parents should be treated equally in respect of their relationship with their children, regardless of gender or marital status." And these principles are undeniable, and they must guide us in the work which follows this report. The child must be protected first and foremost. Parents must be treated equally, and there will always be exceptions and indeed particular situations which the law must provide for, but we must work towards greater equality, and indeed we're doing that. The recommendations for automatic parental responsibility is far-reaching, and any of you who have read the report, and I'm sure you have, it was made before by the Commission, as being referred to earlier, in 1982 in its report on illegitimacy, but was not implemented. Thankfully, terms such as illegitimacy are not used, and the stereotype of the non-marital father has changed. The debate and analysis which will follow this report is likely to be very, very different in terms of its recommendation. Many of these recommendations are aimed at ensuring increased transparency and responsibility in the legal aspects of family relationship, and this is to be heartily welcomed. The recommendation of compulsory joint registration of a child's birth by both parents is an example. By linking the registration of a birth and indeed the parental responsibility, we might ensure greater involvement of more parents from the start of a child's life, as well as the greatest possible chance that children will know both parents through their lives. Over 3,000 or so births each year are registered without the details of a father. The Commission's recommendations in this area might prevent many of these children from having difficulty accessing their fathers later in life. And I think the link between parents and children is fundamental. It must be protected where appropriate and indeed where possible. I welcome in particular the recommendations to allow the spouses and civil partners of a child's parent to have the possibility of obtaining parental responsibility for the children by agreement or by court order. Civil partnerships will become a feature of the family relationships structure in the new Ireland. A significant achievement of this government was indeed, as I mentioned, the Civil Partnership Bill and certain rights and obligations of cohabitants, arguably the most progressive piece of civil rights legislation in many years. And I remember that night in the Dáil when it was finally passed, and I looked up and the whole visitors gallery was crowded with people who were longing for this piece of legislation to be passed. And we all clapped. It was a very human moment, and I remember sitting beside Paul Gogarty and he gave me a kiss on the cheek, recorded by the Dáil cameras for posterity. And let's hope that when we achieve change in dealing with family relationships, that the Dáil gallery will be equally full of parents and fathers in particular who've waited for equality in terms of their own children. Today's report, I think, serves as a reminder to all in the legal and other relevant professions about the need to uphold our family law. Where someone seeks legal representation to seek access to their children, they need to be provided for with a fulsome defence. Where there are false accusations made against parents, they must be investigated. Where court orders are made, they must be upheld to ensure justice. For the political class and myself as a politician, this report represents a huge, huge opportunity to bring about greater equality and consistency in family law. In preparing for this event, I did a good little bit of homework. I read back through some of the debates from times gone by and on legislation in this area. And I'd like to quote to you on one particular passage, and I'll open the quote. This bill is largely devoted to placing children in a general position of equality, regardless of the circumstances relating to their birth. It is effectively devoted to ensuring that a child can establish, where there is any doubt about it, who his mother and father are, and to ensuring that children will have equal rights with regard to guardianship, property, and financial matters, vis-à-vis their parents, irrespective of their circumstances to their birth. End of quote. That was said in 1987 in a debate on legislation responding to a 1982 report by the Law Reform Commission on illegitimacy. I'm sure those of you who are well practiced in the law will recognise that quote. 23 years ago last week, the Status of Children Act was enacted, and it was a positive step that followed huge debate about how society had changed, that the status of children born outside of marriage needs to be regularised, that equality before the law had to be ensured. Many of the same issues remain, but this report represents a crucial opportunity to reform family law and to strengthen the rights of children and parents now and not in a generation's time. And I think the relevant departments need to examine this valued report with urgency, its recommendations responded to as a matter of priority. I am very pleased that this report is being published just before Christmas. Many fathers who I have spoken to and listened to and who have emailed me have spoken about the sorrow that Christmas time brings to many of them, the long and bleak days of Christmas when they can only wonder about the time they might have had with their cherished children. This report, I hope, will give you hope to those fathers that a new era will arise, that their lives and those of their children will be enhanced, that times like these will be brighter in the not too distant future. I will seek, and this is my commitment to you this evening, an urgent meeting with the relevant ministers, the Minister for Justice and the Minister for Social Protection, as a matter of priority in the new year before the dole goes back, and I will drive forward this agenda. I will not stop working on these issues until equality is at the heart of the law concerning family relationships. And once again, on behalf of the government, I would like to sincerely thank the Law Reform Commission for this deep honour of asking me to launch this report. This report is launched.